now would be an opportunity. Yes, sir. If I could distill for the purposes of our recording, Jeff, what's the growth opportunity associated with the MVNOs?
You've got, if we looked back 5 years or 10 years, we had tons and tons of little tiny wireless companies. And over the course of the past 5 or 10 years, there's been so much in mergers and acquisitions, and now we've got fewer larger carriers that are offering everything to everybody. But you've also still got plenty of smaller MVNOs, and more names than you can count. These are smaller companies that focus on a slice of the pie, little slice of the pie. The Google is now an MVNO. I would not think that Google is a company that we should doubt is going to make an impact. I don't know how successful they're going to be. They only offer the Nexus. They're one-handed right now. But will they be a big player a year from now or 2 years from now? The way Apple and Google transformed the handset space, they could. And if they do, are they going to be interested in acquiring one of the wireless carriers that are out there or continuing as an MVNO? But there's a lot of little companies that are not really ever going to be on any of our radars. Some of them will make it, some of them won't, but they're just going to be smaller companies. There's going to be a lot of consolidation continuing. I don't think they're going to ever make much of a noise in the industry, even though some of them might be successful. But you've got a few like Google that and others who will jump in. So I don't think the MVNO space is something that we should ignore, because there's a real potential for industry transformation for the companies that can do it.
Now, George, you and I were talking briefly before we came up here about the incentive auction coming up in March, and I kind of got a kick out of some of your commentary, but maybe you'll share that with the audience and discuss a little bit about how constraints on spectrum might be addressed in the short term.
Yeah, well, I talked a little bit about some of the smaller cell type waves, but first to address the 600. So not so long ago, we had a couple other auctions, several AWS auctions, plus the 700 megahertz auction. And at those points in time, there were folks that were very desperate. AT&T and Verizon very much needed the 700 for 4G. They got it. And then T-Mo, of course, is still lacking. Sprint spectrum, as Jeff pointed out, they've got the most. It's in a higher band, which is very well suited for higher bandwidth type solutions. And Sprint's very capital constrained, so they may be interested in 700 if they had a better capital position. But so in some ways the need for this 600 is muted because of these recent auctions, and then with all the investment going into these smaller cell type technologies. In addition, we've been looking at sort of what could be the value of this spectrum over whatever holding period you're looking at. And based on some of the pros and cons, if you're just a pure investor, it's not that clear, sort of 4 to 7 years, how the value may go up or down. I see tailwinds and headwinds. Long term, there's no such thing as bad spectrum. I mean, whoever thought that the 2.3 gigahertz spectrum that AT&T is now deploying with LTE, I mean, that was trading on pennies on the dollar. If you had been a bold investor, you could have made a lot of money on that. It was the ugly duckling of ugly ducklings. So long term, if you've got a 15-year horizon, the 600 is going to be great spectrum. It propagates very well. Some of the interference issues that come with good propagation will be mitigated, and it'll all be a happy ending. But it'll be very interesting to see how this plays out. But in the near term, back to some of these smaller technologies, the observation around Wi-Fi. Wi-Fi is right now the dominant smaller cell technology. About 75–80% of all of our communications are fulfilled through Wi-Fi. I've said this quote before, so apologize if you've heard it before, but Wi-Fi is like water. Right? It's often free. Sometimes it's not healthy. Sometimes it's expensive and secure, but you can't live without it. So
the question was 3 years out? Google Project Fi? What is the impact that it may or may not make?
You know, if it was any other company, I would not be as certain, based on the success that is expected from this. I don't think Google would be moving into the area unless they have a plan to be successful, both on the handset side and on the Wi-Fi side and on the wireless side. Now, when they got into the wireless business, it was a shock to us all. They just wanted to speed up the delivery of high-speed wireless internet to everyone, and now they seem to be in it, moving into other markets. They're not the fastest. You know, to tell you the truth, AT&T is rolling out a lot faster than Google is, but still, Google gets the attention when I get called by the media every day for comments on different stories that they write, and many stories they call me and they want to talk about Google. You know, they think Google is the center of the universe. It's not, but they think it is. So it's not just a question of the technology. It's also a question of the marketing, the brand recognition, and all of that. So, you know, Google has failed at some things. They haven't succeeded at everything. There's no way to know whether this is going to be successful or not, but I wouldn't bet against Google.
I'd say the same thing. I mean, Google's Google, and it wouldn't really catch up on the radar screen if it wasn't Google. That said, what I think they're ultimately trying to do, and I have no definitive evidence of this, is they're trying to find some killer app or a killer thing, Google thing that'll draw you in. What that is, I have no idea. But without that, you know, I don't think it's going to be successful, other than the fact that, you know, it is Google and they can maybe wrap it into something else eventually. But, you know, I agree with Jeff. If it wasn't for the brand name, it wouldn't be getting that much attention. That said, they've got a lot of resources and they're taking a portfolio approach. I think Jeff said it, you know, they're going to throw out a lot of, you know, ventures out there, and some are going to stick, some of them aren't. If they have some sort of sticky app that draws people in, maybe it could work.
Well, the interesting thing for me about Google is it's not just about Google, but it's the impact that they have on the industry. So if you travel right now heavily to Europe, the Google Fi product is very compelling. It's the same price in Europe as the US, and it's sort of without borders. So it may spur the more accelerated demise of roaming. And we do see over the longer time consolidation internationally, you know, the rise of the mega carrier, and that may suppress some of the roaming costs that we all see. Secondly, you know, they put in Sprint and T-Mobile together as two dueling networks to create sort of constant competition, and that's an interesting dynamic. So in some ways it's creating a federation of networks, and that's got probably a lot of the people that are calling Jeff are probably wondering about that. And finally, it's just simplicity. I mean, who's bought a phone and you go in and you look at the plans, it's got this, it's got that. It's not always been the simplest experience, and Google is bringing a simpler model, which if you've seen what's happened from their simpler model from the cable side, it has drawn a lot of positive attention.
And yes, sir, so how could the joining of Google's brand and capital plus Wi-Fi, what could that do to the industry?
Yeah, I mean, so it impacts obviously a lot of different parts of the ecosystem, Rob, and then that's what you're getting at. With regards to the carrier side, you know, it'll probably be more consumer focused for a bit from our estimation, and it is, you know, it will take, and I think we have sort of consensus, you know, some degree of market share. I don't know if I can give a number, but it'll be enough to make it work, and obviously Google's got deep pockets and other ways to monetize it. With regards to the legitimization of Wi-Fi, I think that it makes a really interesting point in that the next wave of sort of the wide area business is, you know, LTE unlicensed in one form or fashion. That's going to first be exposed in some of the same bands where Wi-Fi exists, right? And then there's a contention around that, and you can do a lot of research on that, but it's being played out. So, you know, a traditional OEM, you need to have a full suite of solutions, including Wi-Fi, and many of those OEMs do have an asset there. But it does create, for the Wi-Fi ecosystem, further solidification that it's going to be around for quite a while.
Perry, would you like to take a shot at that one?
I agree with that. The only thing I'd say is, I think that, a Wi-Fi first network certainly has a lot of consumer applications. I think for those of us in business and enterprise solution that need to have constant, communications, and you're going down the highway at 70 miles an hour, you want to be able to make sure you have a connection. Maybe there'll be some cars that'll have Wi-Fi and that type of thing, but it'll be spotty. It might be tougher from an enterprise business standpoint, at least initially, but, heck, I remember when it was 802.11, when it was just called that. No one even heard of Wi-Fi. And then people came out with sniffers, and, there are all sorts of, every new technology has, the pluses, 2 steps forward, 2 steps back, and, 1 step back, excuse me. So it could be just like that.
Yeah, so Jeff, do you want to weigh in on that?
Not really. I'm just listening to the conversation, remembering, 10, 20 years ago when, Wi-Fi and VoIP and all these technologies were too slow and too bad quality, and you had to use all these things that we never used before. You made a phone call over your computer or the microphone on the computer, listening to the speaker on the computer, and you could barely understand, and they could barely understand. And today, when my sister-in-law calls, I still can't understand a word she says because she uses some of that same crap that was out back then. But
You just don't want to hear.
yeah, but there's a difference because some companies offer good quality service and some still suck. But the point is, as time passes, you do get more. So, we talked about wireless in Wi-Fi in cars, but today very few cars have it, but some do. And going forward, every car is going to be self-driving. Every car is going to be connected to the wireless network. Every car is going to be offering Wi-Fi in the car for every kid in the car and every parent to use their Wi-Fi devices and to watch movies and everything. And this is just the beginning of this wave that's going to transform everything. And that's just from Wi-Fi. We happen to be in the center of the universe. I don't know if, you guys are working hard every day like I do, and you don't really have a chance to stop and think, but what I do for a living is I pull the camera back and I look at the longer term historical transformation that's going on in this industry. And we are in the catbird seat. I'll tell you, we are in the best position of all of any industry that I know because we're transforming the world. We're transforming every other industry. We're transforming the way we do everything from watching television to the apps. I mean, apps were huge 5 years ago. And we went from apps of maybe 500 when BlackBerry ruled to well over 1 million now. And they're still growing like crazy. And apps were the story of every newscast 5 years ago. But today, they're not. Today, it's about other things, other areas of growth. So wireless is continuing to grow. We happen to be in a catbird seat. Many of us are in the industry and we want to stay in the industry, and that's fine. But if you want, look at other industries who are trying to move into wireless who don't have a clue. I get calls all the time from companies that want to brief me on what they're doing, and I'm listening to them, and I hate to laugh when they're talking to me, but they don't have a clue about how the wireless world works or how they're going to integrate what they're doing. Now, 5 years from now, it'll be different. 10 years from now, it'll be different. But right now, companies are struggling, and they do need help from people who know what they're doing. So if you know what you're doing, there are other opportunities that you can look at also.
And Perry, I wanted to ask you, we talked a little bit about MVNOs, we talked about Wi-Fi, so let's consider Comcast. They have a Wi-Fi network somewhere between 9 and 10 million hotspots, largely concentrated on the East and West Coast and metropolitan markets, and we recently see that they exercised this option to do something with Verizon Spectrum. What's the play there?
I'm not going to, I don't really have any idea, I'll be honest with you. I'd love to know myself. I'll leave it to two better panels, maybe.
The play, and you know, they've put some statements out publicly, but it's, you know, we've talked about, again, Wi-Fi and MVNO, and if you're thinking about who could be the disruptors, there's Google, there's Apple, and there's the cable guys, and Comcast, while they don't own spectrum, when they sold their spectrum 4 or 5 years ago, together with Cox and other companies, they picked up a 20-year right to leverage Verizon's network for MVNO services. So there's that's an option that now is likely to be pulled. And so it'd be probably a lot like Google. It'd be Wi-Fi first and with an MVNO. At the same time, you know, they've got a different strategic angle. They've got lots of content. They own content, they distribute content, they have content rights. And so that's sort of their play, and that's where maybe you know, I challenge a little bit of the long term around Sprint or T-Mobile getting very successful around video, because, you know, number one, they don't have content. Number two, they don't have sort of a fixed line play to offload as quickly as possible, and that's sort of where it takes me to my M&A prediction. At some point, you'll probably see those marriages occur down the road.
I'd just say too, you know, a lot of people don't realize, we were talking about Sprint earlier, you know, Sprint PCS was a combination with a bunch of different cable companies getting together, and it didn't work so well. Initially, there were a lot, so I mean, part of it was geographic, and, you know, yes, technology's changed since then, but, you know, how do you make all that work? And cable companies, you know, and I have no bone in this fight, I really don't care, but the cable companies really have not had the best of luck with wireless, you know, in the past. Now, could they change that? Yeah, it could. This could be an opportunity, but generally it has typically not happened in the past very well. But, you know, like Jeff said, things change over time. Maybe it will change.
One of two things are going to happen. Either the cable companies are going to buy the wireless companies, or the wireless companies are going to get smart and start offering cable packages, cable services, you know, to a variety of cable companies, because there is Comcast and they're going to be a player, but there are also tons of smaller cable companies that will never be able to buy a wireless carrier, but they still need to offer it to compete with the local telephone company, or they're going out of business. So there's a lot of opportunities, the challenges.
Amazon's opportunity in wireless. What do you foresee there, Jeff?
Amazon's opportunity in wireless. Well, you know, their first phone didn't work too well. It's a huge opportunity. Amazon is a very successful company, and they've got, you know, an opportunity, if they can figure out how to do it, to deliver. They're already a leader on the wireless side. I don't know what Amazon will look like 5 years from now. It's going to continue to be successful. Now, I remember Amazon, when I hear the name Amazon, I think of the 1990s when they used to sell books, period. You know, it's like Google when they used to have the search engine, period. You know, but then these companies grow and they change and they transform, and some of the areas that they go in don't work. Some of them do. It's like throwing stuff against the wall. Some of it's going to stick and some of it's going to fall down, but some of it's going to stick, and that's what they build on. So, you know, I can't tell you, I don't have an answer, but these are the companies, the Amazons, the Googles, the Apples, you know, these are the companies that are out of the traditional communication space that are going to be players in one way or another. But I just can't tell you what way this is going to be because I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, with Amazon, I think you have to now look at what a couple of their core competencies are. You know, one is obviously they're great at merchandising and discovery and knowing things about you, so that's a leverage point. Secondly, they're pretty big into video, and you know, so when you think about now video going over the top, and we see in 2016 more and more content providers going direct to consumer. So ESPN and others, you see a proliferation of that kind of thing. But then finally, and most importantly, is they're the dominant cloud player right now. And it's dramatic. And they're starting to now publicize their cloud results. And it's dramatic, quarter after quarter after quarter. And they're dominating that to the point where it's not clear who can sort of fill in that second spot for those kinds of cloud services. So as those trends connect to mobile, I think they're certainly going to benefit. I'm not sure if they're going to go MVNO, not sure if they're going to do another device. Yeah, the device was worse than poor in terms of the
Like the
adoption.
Facebook phone.
Yeah.
I'd just say one more thing. I was going to bring up the cloud. I agree with George on the cloud services, the web services. What's interesting about Amazon, and this is something that they have positioned themselves probably on the most unique positions from a public company standpoint, is their investors realize Amazon doesn't have to necessarily make money. They can invest a lot in something, whether it be wireless or something else, and no one cares if they go into negative cash flow or negative earnings, because it's one of those few stocks, and this is me, the former stock analyst, coming out, that people just don't care about quarterly earnings. They get the long-term nature of what Bezos and the Amazon team is doing. And you know what? That's a tremendous advantage, whether it be wireless, back office, what have you. I mean, a lot of people don't realize, too, that they are the back end for so many different other e-commerce platforms out there that you may or may not know. I've worked with some companies that are involved with that. Some of you may be familiar with a company here in town called Innovator. They are the back end e-commerce engine, like and InnoTrack, to so many different things, and they could combine that in so many different ways. You take that and you leverage the fact that they don't have to produce earnings on a quarterly basis, you have to take them seriously.
And I think it's important in the last couple of minutes. We just touched on the cloud. The cloud is huge. The cloud is one of the transformational areas in the industry. And that's what's so great about this industry, is we have so many different transformational events, slices of the pie that are changing the industry. And these are all huge opportunities for us as individuals and as companies.
And we had another question over here, and so the question was, what's it going to take to be the big winner in mobile video?
It gives Jeff some time to think.
The big winner in mobile video will be... Now, it's too early to tell right now, because it's a brand new space and it's transforming every company, it's transforming the entire industry. It depends who markets best, who delivers best, what content they offer, whether the customers can watch it everywhere or not. You're just going to see, at this point, this is the early days in this transformation, and you're going to see so many companies like Verizon, like AT&T, getting into these in different slices of the pie. They're not really competing with each other, but they're moving into this area. And I don't know whether Go90 is going to be a huge success and the leader in the industry or not. But it's off to a great start. Of course, it's brand spanking new, so there's no way really to know what's going to look like in a year or 2 years. It won't look the same as it looks today, because this industry changes so quickly. It's going to continue to grow and continue to change, and you're going to see other companies that are going to be in the same space that are going to transform also. So who's going to be leading 5 years from now or 10 years from now is the question. I don't know, but it depends on the technology, but it also depends on the marketing. You've got to be loved by the customer in order for the customer to buy.
What's the dynamic there between content production and distribution?
That's a good question, because as these companies are moving into these brand new spaces with brand new services, we're going to have to come up with brand new ways to categorize them, because I don't think they're individual. I don't think you can say that they're in one or another, because they do both, and they probably do more than both. So we're going to have to step back, like I was talking about before, and look at this from a longer-term historical perspective, and come up with new categories, because the industry is changing. Who thought a telephone company would compete with a cable television company? Who thought? 10 years ago? No way. That was never going to happen. But today, biggest competitor for AT&T and Verizon are Comcast and Time Warner, Cox. So, and Charter. So this is transforming everything. We're rewriting the rules for every company in every segment, and we're going to have to come up with new ways to compare, see who's winning and who's losing, and how to talk about it, because we really don't even have a language yet.
I would just say there's a big gap between visionary and implementation and doing it right. And I could go back to, we were talking about Sprint earlier. I remember going to Kansas City and seeing this, modern home they must have spent millions of dollars on in Kansas City. It was incredible, all these things they said you could do, and they showed examples, but the technology wasn't there to fulfill it. And we all know that many different pieces of the ecosystem have to come together to make that vision reality. The danger of any new service is, can you portray the vision and then follow it up with real implementation that works for everybody? Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, Apple could be real formidable there. But my opening comments talked about discovery, right? So just think about the customer. You want to be able to find your content, buy it once, have it everywhere. I mean, all the stuff, Rob, you and I used to work on together. And Netflix has solved the problem sort of on the fixed line, over the top, the best. You're all regretting you didn't buy Netflix stock at some point because it's gone up 10x in about the last 4 years. So now we need the Netflix of mobile, but it's not just mobile. It's got to connect with everything. So Netflix, Apple, those are some really interesting places. And of course, the existing players, if they get their act together with discovery and smart purchasing of content, then they'll be there as well. They've certainly got the network assets to have scale. You're done, Rob.
Last question here, gentleman in the front row. So how is the Internet of Things going to reshape the business models that we're
I think
familiar
he was
with?
asking you that question.
Well, and as a journalist, I call in the experts.
I mean, you'll have a variety of models, right? You can have a multi-device plan. Now, some of those, the sneakers may not have a wide area of mobile. Maybe it's just Wi-Fi enabled, so you'll pay for one bucket. You already do that today. But separately, you may have plans that are or models that are funded by whoever you bought the sneakers from. So it could be, I mean, sneakers only last 6 months, so they can just cover that for you. The Amazon Kindle was a brilliant model when you think back to that. Most customers had no idea how the book showed up, right? There was no data plan, and it just worked, right?
Going forward, these models continue to change, and going forward, we're all going to have 1 million devices, whether they're carrying on us, or whether they're Kindles to read, or whether they're tablets, or whether they're the dashboard of the car, or whether they're the TV in the house, or whether there's a smartphone while you're out watching TV, and they're all going to require wireless data. And, we never really had to think about it before because we never really had all these opportunities before, but they're just piling on. And it's getting more and more, and we're using it better and better, and there's faster and faster speeds with 4G, which is allowing all this. And then the next generation 5G is just going to make it even better and faster, and allow us to watch it in more places better and faster. So, the model is just going to continue to change and evolve over time. And the next model that we're going to move to is just going to be a wireless plan that's going to be good for everything that we have. And who knows how we're going to pay for wireless 5 years from now or 10 years from now. I mean, I don't know, because this industry continues to change. With that said,
Perry, would you like to weigh in on that?
I think it's been covered. I mean, I think it's the idea of the bucket. And, I don't care how much my bucket comes from my tennis shoes or whatever. But I do think there are going to be some innovative models that, where Nike may have a separate, plan. But it's like when you maybe just some app that says, okay, Wi-Fi or Bluetooth, okay, this is a new device. Would you like to add that to your plan? Boom. You do it once, and you're set. You just add it to the bucket, and as long as you don't go through this, you stay under your limit, you've got it. If I envision buckets where, that you've bought X buckets of minutes or X buckets of megabits, and it's really what it is when it comes right down to it. It really doesn't matter if it's minutes or, data. You're going to have all of that, and I envision scaling. You've exceeded your limit. Are you willing to pay an extra $5 for the next whatever amount of data? And it may be from multiple devices, but I envision that. I mean, you're already getting those. I've got 3 kids. I've already getting those messages. You're at 75% of your data usage for the month. Yeah. So same concept.
Let me ask you one quick question. Has anybody, is this just happening to me, or is this happening to everyone? I'm all of a sudden getting messages from Comcast before the end of the month that I'm out of my data, my 300 gigabytes, and they want to start charging me another whatever few dollars per next segment. And this is happening month after month now. And I don't think I'm doing anything different. I don't know if it's, and this is actually a question for the audience. Has anybody ever, are you getting the same thing?
You're in a trial market here in Atlanta that initially was rolled out in Florida, and I think several other states coming on in the next few months. Just don't do it 4 months in a row. You can read all about that on rcrwireless.com.
There you go.
So thanks for all the great questions, folks, and let's hear it for our panelists.